Greetings, everyone. This is Alexander Paykin of the Law Office of Alexander Paykin, and I'm here today to discuss with you the practice management portion of the 2020 Tech Report. First off, a disclaimer. Most of the data collected for the 2020 report was collected prior to or just at the beginning of the pandemic. I imagine that in the 2021 Tech Report and the 2022 Tech Report, you will see a lot more aggressive adoption of technologies that allow for remote access, cloud-based access, and so on, and that allow attorneys and support staff to work from anywhere in the world, ideally from their own homes. That being said, the 2020 Tech Report did have some interesting data to discuss. First off, practice management software. Now, this is something that I personally expected to, by 2020, be something that 90+% of attorneys would be using. The data does not bear that out. Instead, it suggests that the adoption in small to mid-sized firms has plateaued, with overall around half of the firms adopting practice management. And at the larger law firms, the ones with 100+ members, the usage of practice management systems has decreased drastically, and not just the usage, but the availability has dropped as well. So while that is at first surprising, I would say that more likely than not, practice management software is something that small to mid-sized firms are gravitating to more so than the large firms, because the small firms and the solos look at practice management as a way to level the playing field. In a large firm, you will have a management team, and attorneys will often have assistants who are responsible for maintaining their calendars, their task lists, their due dates and deadlines, and so on. For a solo or a small practice, that level of support staff may be unattainable, but a practice management system can easily take over and provide that extra technological advantage that lets those law firms leverage what they have and compete with the larger firms. The fact that only about half of the smaller law firms have adopted practice management software suggests that some lawyers are just not going to embrace it and will continue managing their files the old way. And some firms are just not there yet and are hesitant to embrace practice management software because, well, everyone's afraid of change. That being said, I imagine practice management software companies will continue to target the solo, small to mid-sized firms because that's where the most interest and demand for that product is. Next comes conflict checking software. Now, conflict checking software has been somewhat on the rise and is up to substantial usage, especially with the larger firms. The really large firms are embracing it at over 90%. The somewhat large firms with 10 to 49 attorneys have seen a 5% drop, but are still seeing a usage of about 69%. And it's the solo and small law firms that are seeing a 1/3 or less implementation rates. Now, that does not surprise me at all. The reason that does not surprise me is because in practice, the solos and the small firms can either A, conflict check by memory because they're aware of who their clients are and don't have so many clients that it becomes overwhelming, or B, are using a practice management software which has some level of conflict checking baked in, whether it's automated or whether it just comes from the fact that when you go to create a new matter or a new client, you populate in all of the related contacts to that client and matter. And if you see that a particular contact is already in your practice management system's contact list, alarm bells go off and you're alerted that you're dealing with somebody who you've dealt with before and that perhaps you should double check for conflicts. At the same time, very large firms that have 50+ lawyers all doing different things and who may not be aware of each other's practice groups even, and considering those firms are not aggressively adopting practice management software, are left in a position where they have a need for a separate program where they can key in all of the potential new clients coming in and have that program cross-check everything for potential conflicts. So that software is targeted primarily towards the larger firms, as well it should be. Next thing to consider is software that removes metadata. Surprisingly to me, the usage of that software does seem to be experiencing a bit of an uptick. Why does that surprise me? Well, because quite frankly, the majority of lawyers I speak to don't really know what metadata is or why they should remove it in the first place. But it is encouraging that over 50% of lawyers now claim to have availability to and to use metadata removal software. It's unclear exactly what these attorneys mean by metadata removal software because there's lots of different ways metadata could be removed from files. And so it will probably be another couple of years before we see exactly what level of metadata removal lawyers are actually comfortable with doing. Next thing to consider is the actual use of physical computers. The data shows a substantial decline by attorneys in the use of desktops, favoring instead laptops, tablets, and even smartphones to do more and more of their work. While this does not surprise me when it comes to work related to communications, emails, text messages, and so on, I am a bit surprised that lawyers are feeling comfortable abandoning desktops when it comes to drafting and research. Personally, I am a huge fan of desktop computers for the simple reason that I like to have multiple extremely large monitors, each of which is capable of displaying at least 4 monitors worth of information. So I use 42-inch 4K screens, which when I have 2 of them on my desk is the equivalent of having 8 monitors. This allows me to do all sorts of research and drafting without having to fumble with switching tabs and finding a window that fell behind 12 others. I would think more lawyers would appreciate having that kind of a setup. That being said, I've seen very few lawyers actually embrace the idea of a large 4K monitor, let alone multiple 4K monitors. I would suggest it. I would say that if you try it for a month, you'll never go back. But the trends indicate that most lawyers are not aware that they have the option for such technology. Finally, and this one should be fairly obvious in the current pandemic world, but the data appears to have already crept its way up past 90% even before the pandemic. The availability and use of remote access has skyrocketed. Remote access and remote work are apparently here to stay, and that data demonstrated itself even before COVID. In the post-COVID world, I imagine attorneys will much more aggressively embrace remote desktop access, cloud data storage, remote meeting software like Zoom and so on. And well, remote technologies are here to stay. Again, this is just based off of early 2020 data. And once the 2021 data is available, I believe we're going to see that just about every attorney out there is now embracing virtual meetings, virtual conferences, virtual oral arguments, hearings, motions, trials, you name it. So to the extent that attorneys now realize that having physical filing cabinets with files is no longer practical, I think the fact that a lot more attorneys are turning to remote access will inevitably lead to a lot more attorneys turning to practice management software. So ultimately, I imagine that the 2021 and 2022 data will show significant spikes in the use of practice management software, cloud-based storage software, and a complete embrace of remote work and leveraging of technology to get rid of the physical files, physical filing cabinets, physical conference rooms, meetings, and so on. So stay tuned, embrace technology, and help us get to 99.99% acceptance of all sorts of wonderful legal technologies that will make your life easier, that will make your clients' lives easier, that will let you practice more efficiently, more effectively, and more remotely. Enjoy the rest of the tech show, which itself has gone virtual and you're now accessing remotely. If you're interested in getting in touch with me further, I am Alexander Paykin of the Law Office of Alexander Paykin, and you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Avo, or just by Googling Alexander Paykin. That's Paykin. Now enjoy your tech show. Take care.